In this installment of the Extended Forecast, I spoke with meteorologist Mike Carmon, who works in one of the most extreme environments on the planet, the top of Mount Washington. The summit has experienced temperatures as cold as negative 47 degrees Fahrenheit set 2 years ago, with a top wind gust of 231 miles per hour back in 1941. On the afternoon we spoke, Mount Washington was seeing temperatures below zero and sustained winds of 50 to 70 miles per hour. Mike serves as the Mount Washington Summit Weather Operations Manager, spending a decade as a weather observer before landing his current position. It's a job where no two shifts are the same, thanks to the fast changing weather extremes on the mountain. In this episode, we discuss how Mike and other experienced meteorologists spend days at a time in a specially designed structure on the peak, the long journey to the top during the winter, and their role in keeping hikers and locals safe. We also dive into possible exciting changes coming to Mount Washington's forecasts. It's a talk which will take your weather knowledge to new heights. So let the journey begin.
All right, so thank you, Mike, for joining me today. I actually went to Mount Washington back in about the early 2000s in middle school as a family trip. And we went up during the summertime, so obviously conditions weren't too bad, middle to upper 50s, a little breezy. But for those who might not know, talk about how bad the conditions can get, especially during those winter months.
Absolutely. Mount Washington is well renowned for its extreme weather, particularly in the winter, like you mentioned there. Uh, well, our temperatures generally are hovering, at or below freezing for most of the winter months. In the extreme examples, the coldest temperature we've ever recorded on top of Mount Washington is minus 47 degrees Fahrenheit. So that gives you an indication of how cold it can possibly get. We actually just recently hit that mark back in 2023. Yeah, we've had some cold weather recently, but it's not just the cold. We also experience, of course, a lot of snowfall. Being in New England on a mountaintop location, we see an average of about 280 inches of snow in a typical winter. And then probably what Mount Washington's biggest claim to fame is our winds. Our wind speeds year round, our average wind speed year round is 35 miles per hour. And back in April of 1934, we recorded a 231 mile per hour wind gust, which was a world record at the time. It's not a world record anymore, but still, we regularly see winds during the winter months, usually over hurricane force every other day, and over 100 miles per hour every 3 days. So it's a remote, icy, snowy location, just a short 3 hour ride from Boston.
Yeah, and having such extreme conditions, it's not really somewhere that you would think that people could live, and under normal circumstances they couldn't. What is unique about the place that you all stay that allows you to live there during these environments?
Absolutely. Yeah, our Summit Weather Station was, designed to withstand this very extreme weather. The building that we're currently housed in, which is owned by the Mount Washington State Park, part of the New Hampshire State Park system, they're sort of our landlords and we're their tenants. So they, oversee the summit logistically, so to speak. But we have our space as part of that state park space. And yeah, it's a steel reinforced concrete building that's essentially built right into the side of the summit. So it's well protected. We've been in there since the building's been up there since 1980. So it's certainly gone through its wear and tear, despite the wonderful design and the steel reinforced nature of it. It's still, the weather still sort of does its thing. So repairs and maintenance are definitely a big part of life up there.
So with that said, are there plans for like a new building at any point, or do you think this building's going to last for decades to come still?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, right now the building, despite some of the wear and tear it has experienced, it's held up remarkably well. So there's no current plans to really, for a new building or anything like that. However, upgrades are sort of done periodically to make sure things are current and also are holding up to the extreme conditions up there. So yeah, it's interesting. Being in that kind of building when the weather is very extreme, you can hear the effects and see the effects that it's having sort of on the building in real time. But for a building that was built back in 1980, it's held up remarkably well.
Yeah, that's pretty good to go through all that and still be, for the most part, doing well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So when I went to Mount Washington, obviously, like I said, it was during the summertime. So I took the Cog Railway to the top. How do you all get up there with all the snow and the cold and the winds during those winter months?
Yeah, the trip up and down the mountain is part of the biggest challenge, I would say, of life up there, and it's why our observers work week-long shifts, just because getting up and down isn't trivial during the winter time, as you can imagine. So, we actually come up during the winter months when there's enough snow set up on the road. We come up and down the Mount Washington Auto Road in a snowcat, and it's basically what's designed to groom ski slopes. You'll often see them on the sides of ski slopes, making sure the snow is nice and groomed for the skiers. So we have one that has a passenger cab on the back of it. And so every Wednesday, which is our shift change day, our observers load themselves and all their gear into the back of that cat. And we have we actually have a team of very experienced operators that get us up and down the mountain safely during those extreme conditions. So a lot of times going up and down the mountain, you're dealing with whiteout conditions, very cold temperatures. So that can be a challenge just to see where you're going on the road. A lot of times there's a lot of snow that has built up and drifted in on the road, so the operators need to clear that out so they can clear a path to the summit. So yeah, it's even though the auto road is only 7.5 miles long, the Snowcat has a top speed of only about 8 miles per hour. So on a good day with perfect visibility and no snow to clear, the trip takes a little over an hour. But if there's a lot of snow to clear, if there's poor visibility or a combination of those things, it can take quite a bit longer. Just our last shift change last Wednesday took us about 3.5 hours
Wow.
to get from the base to the summit, just because there was that much snow that needed to be kind of cleared out of the way.
And you were saying you do week-long shifts. Do you do like the same thing every single day, or is each day really dependent on the weather and what you have to observe that day?
Yeah, observers like to say no 2 days are the same on top of Mount Washington. There is a pretty good routine set up though. There's certain things that need to be done every day at certain times. Our most important thing is our hourly weather observations that are taken every hour. So our days are kind of scaffolded around going outside every hour to take observations and also to maintain the instrumentation that we're using to take those observations. Um, but there's a lot of other tasks that pop up throughout the day that maybe aren't necessarily as planned. There's can be educational programs that our observers do. There can be some media requests and things like that for interviews if the weather's being particularly extreme. Our observers will often hop on and chat with folks there. And then, of course, there's weather forecasting. Our observers do put out a higher summits forecast for the White Mountains of New Hampshire, mostly used by recreationalists to hopefully make good decisions about days that are good and maybe not so good to go out into the backcountry. So our observers put those forecasts out twice a day just to make sure that that information is getting out there in a timely manner. So yeah, there's a lot to be done. And of course, if the weather is very extreme, if it's a particularly extreme weather day, it's sort of all hands on deck to make sure that wind instruments are functioning, everything's being de-iced properly, nothing's broken, we're getting good readings, that sort of thing.
And as far as those observations go, is there anything like specific that you focus on, or just a wide range of things? And do those observations go towards anything besides keeping the local people safe, or is it more of a broad brush type thing?
Yeah, so our hourly weather observations are METAR observations, and they do get submitted to the National Weather Service. So those observations basically allow us to initialize help initialize forecast models that are used by our observers, and then of course everyone, any meteorologist. So that does have sort of far-reaching implications as far as making sure those observations are as accurate as they can be. But then they are definitely used locally as well, like you mentioned, to just inform the public about what's going on, whether they're in the backcountry or whether there's search and rescue operations happening. Those are all sort of critical areas where we'll share that information where it's appropriate. Yeah, so anything from as local as one hiker checking out to see what the weather's doing above tree line so they can hike up and down or not that day to worldwide global forecast models. Our observations go into all those things.
And as far as your work specifically goes, I think I read that you began there as an intern before you started in 2008. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I started in 2008 as a summit intern, having never been to the White Mountains before. Just heard about Mount Washington from my meteorology classes, and yeah, all this time later, I'm still here. I've done a lot of different roles with the organization. I was gone for a few years in there, but I've come back, and now, yeah, my current role being Summit Weather Operations Manager. I'm on the summit part of the time, I'm off the summit part of the time, but for a 10-year chunk, I was a weather observer. So I did the week on, week off thing for almost 10 years, which was, yeah, a lot of fun. Had a lot of wonderful experiences on top of Mount Washington.
I was going to ask about your time that you left too. Of course, you left in, I think, 2018 after a decade, as you said. Why did you leave? What did you go to pursue? And what brought you back to Mount Washington?
Yeah, yeah, I think there were a couple things that kind of prompted me to kind of take a little bit of a turn in my career. For the last, say, 5 years, 5 of those 10 years as an observer, I took on the additional role of education specialist. And I would do educational programs, primarily remote educational programs with classrooms around the world, talking about the weather on Mount Washington, why it's so extreme, climatology, phenology, all these fun topics. And I think that gave me a little bit of a bug for education. It's not something that I really thought I'd be interested in, but I gained a real passion for it. And so after 10 years, it was time for me to come down from the life of an observer. And unfortunately, there wasn't really a position in the Valley, in our Valley office open at the time. And so I went to work for a small startup nonprofit organization called White Mountain Science, and I helped grow their STEM education program. And so I spent, a few years building that program out in the rural areas of New Hampshire to give students hands-on STEM learning experiences. And that was a lot of fun. But I was, keeping an eye on the observatory because I always knew I thought I would come back. My meteorology and weather is my true passion, and yeah, sure enough, back in the middle of last year, a role opened up that would allow me to mostly work, split my time a little bit more, not spend as much time on the summit, but still get to go up there as part of my job. And that's what brought me back. And so I'm very glad to be back. It's a very, very special place.
And you were talking a bit earlier about the search and rescue aspect too. Has there been any search and rescues that you've been involved with helping out with over your 10 plus years up there?
Absolutely. And I'll kind of caveat that by saying mostly if the observatory is supporting with search and rescue, it's mostly through passing along weather information, not necessarily like a boots on the ground, going out there and looking for folks ourselves. There's a ton of other organizations in the White Mountains that have lots of, whether they're volunteer organizations or fishing game, that are, that's kind of their domain. But yeah, I've definitely been a part of search and rescues where, either the Forest Service or Fish and Game will call up to the summit and they'll ask and they'll say, we're in this situation. We want to go out and look for this person. What's the weather going to do in the next 1, 2, 5, 6 hours, that sort of thing. And yeah, I remember the first time I got a call like that early on in my career. It was a little intimidating, knowing how much was being relied on the information. The weather in Mount Washington can be very unpredictable. And so yeah, that's definitely gave me sort of the sense of extreme responsibility of making sure I know my stuff and know where to look and know where to express certainty and where to express uncertainty when relaying a forecast for something like that. So yeah, it's definitely one of the more pressure cooker type moments when you're relaying information in that kind of situation.
And being in one of the most extreme environments in that part of the world, do you enjoy the challenges that come with forecasting for, in some cases, an hour or two ahead of time that can be difficult to do sometimes?
Enjoy, yes. It definitely is a challenge. That's for sure. It is wonderful though to see that our accuracy or our ability to be accurate out to a longer period of time is definitely there. We've done some analyses and forecast. We do forecast verification all the time, and so over the years, one of the exciting things that happened when I first started forecasting, we were only doing 36-hour forecasts. And a few years before I left as observer, we felt confident and able to bump that up to 48-hour forecasts. And now we're talking about, with the confidence we have and the accuracy we can produce, hopefully in the next year or two, we'll see. We're talking about maybe going out to 72 hours. And for most weather forecasters, it's not really a big deal. But for such an extreme environment where we really only have ourselves to initialize things, going out that far is a big deal. So, and the need is there because people love to plan hikes or backcountry activities, days, weeks in advance. And we know, our forecasts are the most accurate for the area just because our observers are up there and they're in it all the time. And so for us, we know the need is there, and we want them to come to us for the most accurate forecast information. So yeah, we'll see where we get there, but yeah, it's a challenge. That's for sure. Keeps us on our toes.
Oh, I bet. And we've talked all about winter forecasting and the winter environments. What all do you do during the summer? Does it differ from the winter months as far as forecasting and planning goes? And what all goes into that in the warmer months?
Yeah, operations are definitely a little less complicated in the summer months, that's for sure, as opposed to a 3 to 4, maybe 6 hour snowcat ride for transportation on shift change day. It's more like a 20 to 25 minute van ride up and down the Mount Washington Auto Road. So that keeps things a little bit easier for us. But yeah, the weather's not quite as extreme. The snow does completely melt out for a couple months there, so things look very different on top of Mount Washington in the summer. And yeah, we continue to do our daily forecasts. Yeah, the forecasts are not quite as extreme. We're looking at different different parameters. Thunderstorm and convection forecasting becomes a big part of what we're looking for in the summer months. We do see a fair amount of stormy days on Mount Washington, even in the summertime. So, but the other interesting thing I think that happens in the summer is, the Mount Washington Auto Road opens to the public. As you mentioned, going up on the Mount Washington Cog Railway opens to the public in the summer months to the summit, and then of course, you have many more hikers that are hiking up in the summer as opposed to winter. So the summit is much busier with people in the summertime, and so that adds a layer for us as we're going out and doing our observations and maintenance. There's just a lot more people around, a lot more sort of direct education and communication takes place between our observers and the public. So it's a good opportunity for us to kind of directly engage with the public in these maybe some more informal type ways.
So you have like set programs set aside for visitors during the summer to get more hands-on experience with what you all do?
Yeah, absolutely. You could take a weather station tour. You can arrange to come up and go behind the scenes of the weather station, talk to the observers. They'll show you, how we take our observations, how we forecast. It's an opportunity to go to the very top of the tower where all of our instrumentation is, and kind of check out the best views, that sort of thing. So there's that. There's also, we have our Extreme Mount Washington Museum that's located on the summit too. So if you do make it up there, you can go down to our museum and check out. There's different displays and exhibits about the history of the observatory, some of the work that we do, some ongoing research projects, those sorts of things. So that's definitely something to check out. Another way that we kind of inform the public on the work that we do.
So I want to finish up talking about the future of Mount Washington, both your role and just the role in general. Where do you see your career taking you with Mount Washington, and where do you see the observations continuing to grow and expand in the years to come?
Yeah, as far as my role, I'm excited with where my role is now. I know it's a relatively new role, but knowing it's very linked to, I think, where the observatory in general is going. Our goal is, doing more and more research, expanding the summit staff potentially in the coming years. So as the staff expands, does more research, does more broadcasting, there's just going to be a bigger need for an operations manager to make sure things are going smoothly and whatnot. So yeah, I think my role may be changing as we go, depending on whether we go more research, more broadcasting, but that's all sort of in the works. And it's also linked to the specific projects that may be happening. So right now, our research that we're doing has expanded quite a bit. Our education programs have expanded quite a bit in the last few years. So, I think it's going to be really exciting to see where the observatory can go with the projects we have, sort of in the works right now, not only on the summit, but our regional kind of growth. We have regional weather stations, our own local mesonet up here that we're basically tripling in size in the coming years. So that's going to give us even more data to look at, and who knows what we can do with that data.
Sounds like a lot of big things on the way.
Absolutely. Yeah, should be exciting next few years for the observatory.
All right, best of luck to you and good luck with all of that as well. Thanks again, Mike, for taking the time.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Big thanks to Mike Carmon for taking the time to speak to me. Don't forget to like this video, comment below, and subscribe for more future content just like this.